The sudden tap on her windshield jolted Grace Galloway from her spreadsheet reverie, causing her to nearly spill her $5 artisanal coffee all over the custom leather interior of her Mercedes. The security guard gestured apologetically, motioning for her to roll down the window. "Madam, I'm sorry, but you can't park here. This area is reserved for faculty," he explained, shifting uncomfortably under her surprised gaze. "Oh, I'm so sorry, I was just—" Grace's voice trailed off as she glanced around at the familiar campus, nostalgia washing over her unexpectedly. Stonebridge University hadn't changed much in 15 years. The same imposing Gothic architecture, the same perfectly manicured lawns where she'd once sprawled with textbooks and dreams. "I'm actually an alumna," she continued, reaching for her purse. "I'm here for the entrepreneurship panel." "I thought this was visitor parking." The guard's expression softened. "That's over in Lot C, madam, but if you're speaking at the panel, I can let you— Grace Galloway." The voice came from behind the guard, deep and familiar in a way that made her stomach do an unexpected flip. When the guard stepped aside, Grace felt her breath catch in her throat. Standing there in a slightly rumpled dress shirt and khakis was a ghost from her past. His dark hair was shorter now, with hints of gray at the temples, but those warm hazel eyes hadn't changed at all. Hunter O'Brien. She managed, her voice smaller than she'd intended. He smiled, the same crooked grin that had once made her 20-year-old heart race during study sessions in the library. The one and only, though it's Professor O'Brien now, if you can believe it. Grace stepped out of her car, suddenly conscious of her tailored designer suit, the diamond studs in her ears, and the watch on her wrist that cost more than most people's monthly salary. "Professor, you." The guy who once convinced the entire economics class to skip the final and go to the lake instead. Hunter laughed, the sound warming something inside her that had been cold for too long. "That's ancient history. What are you doing back at Stonebridge?" "Last I heard, you were conquering Silicon Valley." "I'm speaking at the entrepreneurship panel. They asked me to come inspire the next generation or something." She waved her hand dismissively, though the invitation had secretly pleased her. "What about you?" "How did Hunter O'Brien, campus rebel and party legend, end up as faculty?" A small voice interrupted before he could answer. Dad, I got in on my science project." A girl of about 8 came bounding up, her dark pigtails bouncing with each step, a paper clutched triumphantly in her hand. She stopped short when she saw Grace, suddenly shy. "Hey, pumpkin," Hunter said, his entire face lighting up as he lifted the child effortlessly. "That's amazing. I told you all that hard work would pay off." He turned to Grace with unmistakable pride. "Grace, this is my daughter, Lily." "Lily, this is Miss Galloway. She's an old friend of mine from when I was a student here." Lily offered a small wave. "Hi." "Hello, Lily," Grace smiled, genuinely charmed by the child's gap-toothed grin. "Congratulations on your A." "Thanks, it was about ecosystems." "Dad helped me build a terrarium with real plants and bugs and everything." Hunter set his daughter down gently. "Lily's school is just across campus. They have an after-school program for faculty kids." Grace nodded, trying to process this new version of Hunter responsible father, respected professor against her memories of the carefree, sometimes reckless boy she'd known. "So, do you teach economics? Is that why you're here?" she asked. "American literature, actually," Hunter replied with a self-deprecating shrug. "Turns out all those electives I took instead of focusing on my business degree weren't a waste after all." The security guard cleared his throat. "Professor O'Brien, should I let Miss Galloway park here?" "Yes, please." "She's our guest speaker." Hunter turned back to Grace. "The panel doesn't start for 2 hours. Would you like a tour? See what's changed, or more accurately, what hasn't?" Grace hesitated, glancing at her phone. She had planned to review her talking points, maybe make a few calls. But something in Hunter's expression, a mixture of hope and nostalgia that mirrored her own feelings, made her nod. "I'd like that," she said simply. "Can I come too?" Lily asked, looking up at her father with pleading eyes. Hunter glanced at Grace questioningly. Of course, Grace said before he could speak. I'd love to have you along, Lily. As they walked across the campus, Grace found herself relaxing for the first time in months. The constant tension she carried in her shoulders, the perpetual urgency of running Galloway Tech, all of it, seemed to recede as she listened to Hunter point out new buildings and reminisce about old haunts. Remember that bench? He asked, pointing to a weathered wooden seat beneath a massive oak tree. That's where you finally agreed to tutor me in calculus after I failed the midterm, Grace laughed. Only because you promised to buy me coffee for a month. Best investment I ever made, Hunter said softly, his eyes holding hers for a moment too long. Dad, I'm hungry, Lily announced, breaking the moment. Can we go to the cafe, please? Hunter checked his watch. I suppose we could grab something to eat. They made their way to the student center, where the cafe had been modernized but still served the same oversized cinnamon rolls that had once been Grace's weakness. Hunter insisted on paying, waving away her protests. You can get the next one, he said, then looked embarrassed. I mean, if there is a next one, which there probably won't be, since you're just here for the day and— I'd like that, Grace interrupted, saving him from his awkward backpedaling. As they settled at a table, Grace couldn't help but notice how different Hunter seemed from the men she usually associated with the venture capitalists, the tech entrepreneurs, the hedge fund managers who populated her social circle in San Francisco. There was an authenticity to him that was refreshing. So, tell me about Galloway Tech, Hunter said, helping Lily cut her sandwich into manageable pieces. The business pages make it sound like you're basically running the digital future. Grace shrugged, suddenly uncomfortable with discussing her success. We've had a good run. Started with app development, expanded into cloud services, and now we're focusing on AI integration. Nothing revolutionary, just good timing and hard work. And brilliance, Hunter added. You were always the smartest person in the room, Grace. Everyone knew it. She felt her cheeks warm. What about you? Literature professor wasn't exactly in your 5-year plan back then. Hunter's expression shifted, something wistful passing across his face. Life takes unexpected turns, right? After graduation, I drifted for a while, did some traveling, worked odd jobs. Then I got my master's in English and found I actually loved teaching. He glanced at Lily with undisguised affection. And then this little munchkin came along and gave me a real purpose. And Mom left, Lily added matter-of-factly, her mouth full of sandwich. Hunter winced. Lily, remember what we said about private family matters? Sorry, the girl muttered, not looking particularly sorry. Grace tried to hide her surprise. Hunter was a single father. She'd automatically assumed he was married, possibly to some fellow professor who shared his intellectual interests. It's just been the two of us for about 5 years now, Hunter explained quietly while Lily became absorbed in her bag of chips. Caroline decided academia wasn't for her. Last I heard, she was in Seattle working for some tech startup, ironically enough. I'm sorry, Grace said, meaning it. Hunter smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Don't be. It was tough at first, but we figured it out. The university has good benefits, flexible hours. We make it work. He changed the subject. What about you? Married? Kids? Pet goldfish? Just the company, Grace admitted. It's kind of all-consuming. I remember you saying you wanted 3 kids by 30, Hunter said, surprising her with his memory. During that stupid Where Will You Be in 10 Years exercise in Psychology 101. Did I? Grace tried to recall the naive girl she'd been, full of certainty about her future. Well, 30 came and went. I was too busy building Galloway Tech to think about building a family. Any regrets? Hunter asked, his gaze direct and curious. The question caught her off guard. No one in her current life would dare ask her something so personal. They were all too intimidated by her success, her wealth, her carefully constructed persona of the confident tech mogul. Sometimes, she admitted, her voice soft. When I see families together or when I go home to an empty house after a 16-hour day. She shook her head, embarrassed by her candor. But that's the trade-off, right? You can't have everything. Hunter seemed about to reply when his phone buzzed. He checked the screen and frowned. I'm sorry, I need to take this. It's the department chair. He stepped away to answer the call, leaving Grace alone with Lily. The little girl studied Grace with unnerving intensity. Are you rich? She asked bluntly. Grace nearly choked on her coffee. That's not a question we usually ask people, Lily. But are you? Dad says you run a big company, and you have a fancy car and really shiny shoes. Grace glanced down at her Laubautens, amused. I suppose I am, by most standards, but money isn't everything. Dad says that too, Lily nodded sagely. He says experiences and relationships are worth more than things. Your dad is very wise, Grace said, watching Hunter pace nearby, his brow furrowed in concentration as he spoke into his phone. He works really hard, Lily continued. Sometimes he stays up super late grading papers after I go to bed, and he always helps me with my homework even when he's tired. Grace felt a pang of respect for Hunter. He seems like a wonderful father. He is, Lily agreed with fierce loyalty, but he gets sad sometimes. I think he's lonely. Before Grace could formulate a response to this unexpectedly profound observation, Hunter returned, looking apologetic. I'm so sorry, but there's an emergency department meeting I need to attend before the panel, he explained. Apparently, there's some issue with the curriculum committee. Of course, Grace said, hiding her disappointment. I should probably prepare for the panel anyway. Miss Galloway, will you come to dinner at our house tonight? Lily asked suddenly, looking up at Grace with hopeful eyes. Lily, Hunter looked mortified. You can't just invite people over without discussing it first. But Dad, you said you wished you could catch up more with Miss Galloway, and now you can. Lily argued with impeccable 8-year-old logic. Grace laughed at Hunter's obvious embarrassment. I'd love to come to dinner if the invitation stands, she said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. Hunter's expression shifted from embarrassment to pleased surprise. Really? It won't be fancy, just spaghetti, probably. Spaghetti sounds perfect, Grace replied, suddenly realizing how long it had been since she'd had a simple home-cooked meal with good company. They exchanged phone numbers, and Hunter promised to text her their address after the panel. As they walked back toward the lecture hall, Lily between them, Grace found herself studying Hunter's profile. He'd grown into his features. The boyish charm had matured into something more substantial, a quiet confidence, a thoughtful demeanor that she found unexpectedly attractive. The panel went well, better than Grace had anticipated. Speaking to eager young entrepreneurs about her journey from dorm room coder to CEO reminded her why she'd started Galloway Tech in the first place, not for the wealth or the accolades, but for the pure joy of creation, of solving problems that seemed unsolvable. From the back of the auditorium, Hunter watched with Lily, his expression a mixture of pride and something else she couldn't quite decipher. When she finished, and the applause died down, he gave her a thumbs up that made her feel like she'd won an Oscar rather than just delivered another corporate speech. Later that evening, Grace found herself driving through a modest neighborhood near campus, following her GPS to Hunter's address. She'd changed out of her power suit into jeans and a simple blouse, feeling oddly nervous as she pulled up to the small but well-maintained craftsman-style house. Fairy lights adorned the porch, and flower boxes hung from the windows, giving the place a warm, inviting feel. Grace had spent the afternoon contemplating whether to bring wine, eventually deciding on a bottle of moderately priced Cabernet not so expensive that it would make Hunter uncomfortable, but nice enough to show she'd put thought into it. Lily answered the door, practically vibrating with excitement. You came, Dad. Miss Galloway is here, and she brought purple juice. Hunter appeared from what must be the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He wore jeans and a faded Stonebridge University t-shirt, looking more relaxed than he had on campus. It's wine, Lily, not purple juice, he corrected gently, then smiled at Grace. "Thank you for coming, and for the wine. Please come in." The interior of the house was exactly what Grace might have expected, bookcases everywhere, overflowing with volumes organized in no discernible pattern. Comfortable, slightly worn furniture. Art clearly made by Lily proudly displayed on the refrigerator and walls. "It's not much," Hunter said, following her gaze with a hint of self-consciousness. "It's wonderful," Grace replied honestly. "It feels like a home." The evening flowed with surprising ease. They ate spaghetti at a small kitchen table, Lily dominating the conversation with detailed accounts of her school day and friends. Grace found herself laughing more than she had in months, maybe years, as Hunter shared stories about campus politics and his more eccentric students. After dinner, Lily insisted on showing Grace her room, proudly pointing out her collection of rocks, her bookshelf organized by color, and the solar system mobile hanging from the ceiling that Hunter had helped her build. "Time for bed, pumpkin," Hunter announced from the doorway. "It's already past your bedtime." Lily pouted briefly but didn't argue. She surprised Grace with a quick hug. "Will you come back again sometime? Dad makes really good pancakes on Saturdays." Grace felt her heart constrict at the innocent invitation. "That's up to your dad, sweetie." "She's welcome anytime," Hunter said softly, his eyes meeting Grace's over Lily's head. After Lily was tucked in, Hunter and Grace settled on the back porch with glasses of wine. The night was cool but not cold, the sky clear enough to see stars despite the nearby campus lights. "Your daughter is incredible," Grace said, watching the way the porch light caught the red highlights in Hunter's hair. "She's the best thing I've ever done," he agreed, "even on the hard days." "Are there many of those? Hard days, I mean?" Hunter considered the question. "Fewer now than at the beginning. The first year after Caroline left was rough. Lily was only 3 and I was still finishing my PhD, teaching part-time. There were moments I wasn't sure I could do it. But you did," Grace observed. "And brilliantly, from what I can see." Hunter shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "We get by. The university pays well enough, but with student loans, the mortgage, and saving for Lily's education, let's just say we're not taking exotic vacations." "Money isn't everything," Grace repeated Lily's earlier words. "Says the tech millionaire," Hunter teased, but there was no malice in it. "Billionaire, actually," Grace corrected, then immediately regretted it when she saw Hunter's expression change. "I'm sorry, that sounded terrible." Hunter laughed, but it was a bit forced. "No, it's fine. I'm genuinely happy for your success, Grace. You always had big dreams. I'm glad they came true for you." The conversation shifted to memories of their college days, study groups that turned into movie nights, that disastrous spring break road trip where their car broke down in the middle of nowhere, the graduation ceremony where Hunter had somehow convinced the band to play Schools Out instead of the traditional processional. "Why did we lose touch?" Grace asked suddenly, the question that had been nagging at her all day finally surfacing. Hunter swirled the wine in his glass, considering. "Life, I guess. You went to Silicon Valley for that internship. I stayed here for grad school." Then emails got less frequent, phone calls stopped. He looked at her directly. "And if I'm being completely honest, I think I was intimidated by your success. Each time I heard about your latest achievement, it felt like we were in different worlds." "That's ridiculous," Grace said, but she knew it wasn't. She'd experienced the same thing with other college friends, watching relationships fade as her wealth and status grew. "Is it? Look at you, Grace. You're on magazine covers. You have a net worth with more zeros than I can comprehend. You probably have homes in multiple countries." "Just San Francisco and a small place in New York," she said, trying for humor. Hunter smiled, but his eyes remained serious. "My point is, our lives couldn't be more different now." "And yet," Grace said softly, "sitting here with you feels more real than anything in my life has in years." The admission hung between them, honest and vulnerable in a way Grace rarely allowed herself to be. Hunter reached across the small space between their chairs and took her hand, his palm warm against hers. I thought about you, he confessed. Over the years, I'd see your name in articles, watch your interviews. I always wondered if you were happy. Are you asking if I'm happy now? Grace turned her hand to interlace her fingers with his. Are you? She considered the question carefully. I'm successful. I'm respected in my field. I've created something meaningful. She paused. But happy? I don't know if that's the right word. Content, maybe, fulfilled professionally. But there's always been something missing. What? Hunter's voice was barely above a whisper. Grace looked at their joined hands. Connection. Real, honest connection with someone who sees me, not my bank account or my company. Hunter's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, sending unexpected shivers up her arm. I've always seen you, Grace. Even back then, when everyone else saw the perfect student, the future success story, I saw the girl who cried watching sad movies, who was terrified of thunderstorms, who wanted to change the world but was afraid she wasn't good enough. Grace felt tears prick at her eyes, surprised by the emotion his words evoked. I'm not that girl anymore, aren't you? I think she's still in there. Hunter's gaze was warm, knowing in a way that made her feel exposed and comforted all at once. Before she could respond, a small voice called from inside the house. Dad, I had a bad dream. Hunter released her hand with obvious reluctance. Duty calls, I'll be right back. Grace watched through the window as he comforted Lily, struck by the tenderness in his movements, the patience in his expression as he listened to her describe the nightmare. This was a side of Hunter O'Brien she'd never known in college, the devoted father, the nurturer, the steady presence. When he returned, something had shifted between them, a new awareness that made the night air seem charged with possibility. She's asleep again, Hunter said, reclaiming his seat. Sorry about that. Don't apologize. It's sweet seeing you with her. Being a dad changes you, Hunter admitted. Makes you think about what really matters. And what really matters? Grace asked. Hunter considered the question. Love, time, creating memories, being present for the people who need you. He looked at her curiously. What about you? What matters most in Grace Galloway's world? The question made her uncomfortable, forcing her to confront priorities she usually avoided examining too closely. Innovation, I suppose, problem-solving, building something that outlasts me. Those are legacy goals, Hunter observed. Important ones, but what about now? What brings you joy in the present moment? Grace was silent, realizing she didn't have a ready answer. Her days were filled with meetings, decisions, constant forward motion. When was the last time she'd done something purely for joy? I don't know, she admitted finally. And that's rather sad, isn't it? Hunter's expression was compassionate rather than judgmental. It's never too late to figure it out. The conversation continued late into the night, moving from philosophical to personal and back again. When Grace finally glanced at her watch, she was shocked to see it was well past midnight. I should go, she said reluctantly, setting down her empty glass. I have a flight back to San Francisco tomorrow afternoon. Hunter walked her to the door, both of them suddenly awkward, like teenagers after a first date. Thank you for dinner, Grace said, fumbling for the right words. And for everything. Will you be back in town again soon? Hunter asked, hope evident in his voice. Grace hesitated. The truth was, she had no reason to return to Stonebridge. Her life, her work, her responsibilities were all in California. I don't know, she answered honestly, but I'd like to stay in touch, really stay in touch this time. Hunter nodded, disappointment and understanding warring in his expression. Of course. Maybe Lily and I could visit San Francisco sometime. I've always wanted to show her the Golden Gate Bridge. I'd like that, Grace said, meaning it more than she could express. There was a moment, brief but charged, when Grace thought Hunter might kiss her. Instead, he leaned forward and hugged her, a warm, lingering embrace that felt both familiar and thrillingly new. Good night, Grace Galloway, he said softly as he released her. It was really good to see you again. Good night, Hunter, she replied, surprised by how difficult it was to walk away. Back in her hotel room, Grace found herself unable to sleep. Her mind kept returning to the evening, the simple dinner, Lily's uninhibited enthusiasm, Hunter's thoughtful questions. It had been so different from her usual carefully orchestrated business dinners, or the society functions she attended out of obligation rather than desire. On impulse, she reached for her laptop and pulled up her calendar. Her assistant had scheduled meetings for the entire week following her return, but none were truly urgent. The company wouldn't collapse if she took a few days off. When was the last time she'd done that? Before she could second-guess herself, Grace sent an email to her executive team informing them she was extending her trip by 1 week for personal reasons. Then she texted Hunter, "Changed my flight. I'm staying in town until next Saturday. Would you and Lily like to show me what I've been missing in Stonebridge for the last 15 years? His response came almost immediately, as if he'd been awake thinking of her too. "Lily will be thrilled. So will I. Pancakes tomorrow, 10 a.m. Grace smiled as she typed her reply, "It's a date." The next morning, as Grace drove back to Hunter's house, she felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. The week ahead stretched before her, unscheduled and full of possibility. She had no 5-year plan for whatever was developing between her and Hunter, no strategic roadmap, no projected outcomes. For once in her meticulously organized life, Grace Galloway was simply following her heart. Hunter was waiting on the porch when she arrived, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. His smile as she approached made her heart skip in a way that reminded her she wasn't just a CEO, a businesswoman. A success story, she was also simply Grace, a woman who might be falling in love all over again. "You're really staying?" Hunter asked as he handed her a mug, his tone suggesting he still couldn't quite believe it. "I'm really staying," Grace confirmed, taking a sip of the perfectly prepared coffee he still remembered how she liked it after all these years. "I thought it was time I remembered there's more to life than quarterly reports and board meetings." "Like pancakes," Hunter suggested with a grin. "Like pancakes," Grace agreed. "And maybe like reconnecting with someone who knew me before I became Grace Galloway, tech titan." Hunter's expression turned serious. "I liked Grace Galloway, the college student, but I think I might like this version of you even more." From inside the house, Lily's voice called out impatiently, "Dad, are the pancakes ready yet? Is Miss Galloway here?" "Coming, pumpkin." Hunter called back, his eyes never leaving Grace's. "Fair warning, once you enter, you're officially part of Pancake Saturday. There's no backing out." Grace took a deep breath, feeling as though she stood on the threshold of something much more significant than a simple breakfast. "I wouldn't dream of backing out." As they walked into the house together, Grace realized that sometimes the most unexpected reunions could lead to the most beautiful beginnings. And maybe, just maybe, her heart had room for more than success. It had room for love, for family, for a future she'd never dared to imagine. The rest of the week passed in a blur of simple pleasures and deepening connection. Grace and Hunter took Lily to the local science museum, spent an afternoon at the lake, where they'd once skipped class to swim, and explored the farmers' market that had sprung up in town since their college days. Evenings were filled with board games, conversations that lasted until midnight, and increasingly tender moments when Lily was asleep. By the time Friday arrived, her last full day in Stonebridge, Grace knew with absolute certainty that she didn't want to leave. Over dinner at a small Italian restaurant, while Lily was at a sleepover with a friend, Grace finally voiced the idea that had been forming all week. "I'm thinking of opening a Galloway tech satellite office here," she said, watching Hunter's expression carefully. He set down his fork, studying her face. "In Stonebridge? Why would you do that?" "Small college towns have great talent pools," Grace replied, the business justification she'd rehearsed ready on her lips. "Lower overhead costs, quality of life that attracts employees, and—" Hunter prompted, clearly sensing there was more. Grace took a deep breath. "And because I think I'm falling in love with you, Hunter O'Brien. Again, or still, I'm not sure which." The smile that spread across Hunter's face was worth every bit of vulnerability the admission cost her. He reached across the table to take her hand. "I never stopped loving you, Grace. Not really. I just convinced myself we were living in different worlds." "Maybe we still are," Grace acknowledged, "but I'm willing to build a bridge between them if you are." Later that night, standing on Hunter's porch under a sky full of stars, their first kiss felt like coming home and embarking on an adventure all at once. Grace knew there would be challenges ahead her life in San Francisco, his commitment to Stonebridge, the logistics of merging two very different worlds. But as Hunter's arms wrapped around her, strong and sure, she also knew they would figure it out together. 1 year later, Grace stood in the backyard of what was now their home, watching Lily help Hunter hang fairy lights in the trees for her 9th birthday party the next day. The satellite office of Galloway Tech was thriving in downtown Stonebridge, staffed by a mix of local talent and transplants from Silicon Valley who'd been eager for a change of pace. Grace still traveled to San Francisco regularly, but technology made running her company from a small college town surprisingly manageable. More importantly, she'd found the balance that had eluded her for so long: professional fulfillment alongside personal joy, achievement alongside connection. "Hey, daydreamer," Hunter called, interrupting her thoughts as he descended from the ladder. "Penny for your thoughts. Just thinking about how lucky I am," Grace replied, leaning into him as his arms slipped around her waist. "We're the lucky ones," Hunter corrected, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Right, Lily, right," Lily agreed enthusiastically, though she was more focused on the string of lights in her hands than the conversation. "Grace, can you help me with this part? It's tangled." Grace moved to help, her heart full as she worked alongside the child who had, in the space of a year, become as dear to her as if she were her own. Later, as the three of them sat on the porch swing, Lily between them with a book of constellations, Grace caught Hunter watching her with a softness that still made her breath catch. "What?" she asked quietly, not wanting to disturb Lily's concentration. "Just thinking about how a chance meeting in a parking lot changed everything," he replied. "Who would have thought the famous Grace Galloway would end up here, in a small town with a literature professor and his kid?" "I would have," Grace said with certainty. "If someone had told 20-year-old me that this was waiting for me down the road, I would have believed it in a heartbeat." As night fell over their little corner of Stonebridge, Grace marveled at how the universe sometimes had a way of bringing people full circle. She'd left this town 15 years ago with dreams of changing the world through technology. She'd achieved that dream beyond her wildest expectations. But it was only in returning and reconnecting with Hunter, in building this unexpected family, that she'd finally found what success alone could never provide. A place to belong, hearts to call home, and a love story that was still only beginning.